Welcome and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Crexi Podcast, an insider's look at all things commercial real estate. I'm your host, Yannis Papadakis, Business Development Manager at Crexi, and today we are thrilled to sit down with Ben Hand of Brookwood Capital Advisors. Before we dive in, a little bit about our guest. Ben is the founder and managing director of Brookwood Capital Advisors. He speaks Arabic and English, and if you're lucky, he'll tell you the secrets of value-add retail. Ben founded Brookwood Capital in 2016 to specifically address opportunity and investments in shopping centers following a stint working as a senior associate at Triple Net Investment Group. He entered the commercial real estate industry working for Cushman & Wakefield, where he specialized in retail assets. Ben achieved his Bachelor's of Science from the George Washington University. Ben, welcome to the podcast. Let's dive in. So first, I'm curious, how did you get to where you are today, career path wise? What got you into commercial real estate? What was the onus for, starting this journey?
Yeah, I kind of got lucky. I graduated college, didn't really have a job. And my dad is a pastor, and I asked him to connect me with some people. And there was this Christian internship program. And, I got into a commercial real estate company, and it kind of took off from there. So I really just kind of got lucky, to be honest with you.
Interesting. Any early lessons that you learned that you feel prepared you for commercial real estate success?
Yeah, I mean, when you're a kid and you're one of the kids that's more of a self-starter, or you're trying to do like little side things in high school for extra cash, or maybe your first job is working at a grocery store and you're trolling the parking lot like I was for tips and help people with their groceries, then you can tend to be in a sales role or in a job that rewards activity. And so if you're hustling in your teens, then you can probably hustle in your 20s and 30s and 40s, and just kind of graduate from there.
So you're telling me you've always been a born hustler and that nothing really changed for you. You just kind of fit right into, what your skill set was already, developing towards.
Yeah, I think most people in our industry are, naturally a little more hustle inclined.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Any early mentors that, you learned from or kind of showed you the ropes that kind of gave you that foundation?
Yeah, I had a lot of different groups that I worked for. I worked for a traditional brokerage firm in Memphis, doing Cushman & Wakefield, just more Class A, regular office brokers. Worked for a small group in Virginia, Triple Net, which was single tenant stuff. And both of those were smaller offices. So I had some great leaders, but also it was like kind of figure it out yourself as well. So it was 50-50.
Right. Yeah, it's they'll give you the the bumpers on the gutter when you're bowling, but you got to roll the ball. Excellent. All right. Well, what led you to forming and starting your own team and founding Brookwood Capital? So when did you feel like, okay, I'm ready to do my own thing?
Well, when you're a young broker, most of your stuff is on your own. You're finding your own stuff, and you're selling your own stuff. So I was doing brokerage, and the splits were not great in regular brokerage world. They're 50-50 or best case 70-30. Some people have a little bit higher, but that was the best case for us. And I was realizing I was doing all of the work and finding all of the people. And so we started a little brokerage firm, and then it took off from a brokerage firm where we saved up a little bit of money and started buying our own stuff, and it kind of grew from there.
Nice. Organic growth and understanding it from the inside too, working the deals, buying the deals, that's definitely a enviable path that I'm sure a lot of people that are just getting started in this industry would love to know. Okay, where is the blueprint? How do I become Ben Hand? Now, when you started, what led you to focusing on shopping centers and retail spaces? I know that you had experience with that on the brokerage side. Is your familiarity with the product really kind of what led you to start diving in as an investor, or were there other factors involved? I'm sure you were seeing a lot of things in the market. How did you hone in on shopping centers and retail?
Yeah, retail just makes sense, I think, to a lot of people. Naturally, like you can think about where you go to shop, why you go to shop there, stuff like that. Office and other industrial didn't make sense to me. So retail just made sense. in my, basic brain of understanding, where I go to shop. So I think that helped a lot. And then from doing brokerage, I realized that when we added leases for people, they were able to sell their centers for significantly more. So I was like, wow, the ability to lease creates a ton of value. So if we can buy stuff that's half empty and lease it up, it stands to reason that we might be able to sell it for more. So bought a couple of really tiny little buildings to start. I think it was like 20 grand to start, in the middle of nowhere, small town. And then, leased that up and sold it, leased another one up and sold it. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
I'd say, I think a very valuable lesson for anybody that wants to, start investing is you don't be afraid to start small, right? If you know the product and what you can do with it, go out where your money can, the juice is worth the squeeze. And would you say that the competition in those markets was less fraught than some of the stuff you're competing on now?
Probably, yeah. I mean, the competition was more local people who have local valuations of real estate. So if you buy the 30,000 square foot former grocery box and you find a tenant to do a 10-year triple net lease, even if that's a local tenant that, is just getting started, the value of the empty box in a small town is maybe $150,000 right now. When I was starting, it was 30, 40 grand, but let's say best case 150,000. But with that tenant, it now triple net asset and this cap rate play. And so like a lot of that little cap rate stuff versus the value of the empty building is where you can make the marginal difference. So yeah, definitely start small. I think that helped us a lot. It's like pilots, pilots learn on tiny little planes and then they graduate to Boeings, but some people in our industry, they just come across a little bit of money or a lot of money. And then they start in the big, huge planes. They start in Boeing. You don't know how to fly. Why are you trying?
Yeah. You just got your wings. Don't try to, land the spruce goose on, your first solo flight. I hear that.
We try to take down $8, $9, $10 million large centers, and they may have the cash, but they don't necessarily have the ability to fly a plane. And that's a big plane to take down.
And not only that, this makes a good segue into my next question. Even, let's say, experienced pilots, right, that are used to those big centers have had, to stay with the analogy, a lot of turbulence over the last 2 years because of COVID, right? So even those, weathered pilots, that are used to these larger deals and assets, they got thrown a curveball, with COVID that, many of them weren't prepared to take a swing at. How would you say your reaction and response to kind of changing market atmospheres with COVID positioned you to really come out the other side as, a step ahead and not a step behind?
Yeah, well, I think we were a step behind. We had some stuff. We thought, okay, so I was just coming into the industry when 2009, 2010 crash was happening. I was graduating college 2013, so I was a few years behind. I thought, okay, COVID is another crash. Let's dump a bunch of stuff. Let's get as much cash as we can, and then there's going to be a ton of stuff in the market, and we can pick up a bunch of stuff cheap. And it didn't really happen. So we sold some really decent product at lower prices than we needed to, some assets that we really liked and really liked owning to free up cash. And then we didn't really see a crash. So, hindsight is 2020. If I knew everything was going to stay relatively the same or improve markets, I wouldn't have done that. But, other than a couple of months of rent collections, it really didn't phase us. And thankfully all our stuff is owned free and clear. Cash. We started small and 10%. So we were miss a month or two of rent.
Keeping your head healthily above the waterline, in the event that, the unexpected does happen and, you need to put an action plan, into effect immediately with, unknown circumstances on the other side of it. I can say hindsight, obviously, if you have a crystal ball, everybody would be billionaires, if everybody knew what was going to happen on the other side of every event. But the fact that you were proactive, and immediately starting to, take steps in the event, hey, we don't know where this is going to go. Would you say that had things gone a different route, if the market had gone over an edge, you probably put yourself in a very strong position to be able to capitalize on some of that new product that's coming out. And that's not to say that product's not eventually going to hit too. We're seeing, and I'm sure you're hearing too, it's coming. That wave is coming.
For years, much smarter people than me have been saying that, and it hasn't happened. So we'll see. I hope that's what the case for some value add guys like myself. But we'll see. You probably know trends being Crexi.
Well, I'd like to think so, but the truth is, active stakeholders in the market like yourself oftentimes have just as good, if not better, direct insight into what's happening in the market directly around your own deals. So, being that local market expert really gives you an advantage. What would you say? I'm kind of pivot back to shopping centers in general. Aside from your own portfolio and how you reacted to COVID, what have you seen market wide in terms of how shopping centers have maybe changed since the start of COVID?
Yeah, I mean, you've seen some shuffle in tenants, but only like 2 or 3 declared bankruptcy, and they usually, if they're Class A, they were backfilled. I mean, it's so regional specific. We're in the Southeast where we really didn't see much of a change. Across the board, grocery stores went bananas. Like 2 years ago, there would buy low chain in Southeast declared bankruptcy. Southeast Grocers, they had a couple hundred stores. They declared about a year before COVID. I bet you if they stayed around and were through COVID, they'd be fine now. Every grocery in the country is sitting on fat stacks of cash. So that helped. Grocery necessity retail became the thing. Tractor Supply sitting on $billions of cash right now in necessity retail. So if any retailer made it through COVID successfully, they're probably sitting on a decent amount of cash right now, most of the ones that we interact with. But I don't really work in areas that got heavily impacted by coronavirus. Like we're down in the Southeast. So thankfully we were mostly open and things kind of returned back to normal fairly quickly. Some friends in Northeast or California, their centers are still being impacted. So I couldn't really speak to those areas.
Right. And I mean, that kind of speaks to, my next question here, which is about working in different states. You kind of have to be prepared to deal with, local and regional legislation, as it pertains to your investment there. How do you stay on top and stay ahead of that? I mean, if you've got deals in 20 states, you might have 20 different, boards of supervisors telling you, this you can do, this you can't do for this amount of time. Like it becomes a pretty tangled mess. Like, what do you do to stay on top of it?
It's a good question. We try to stay in states we recognize. It's mostly realistically red states in the Southeast. So regions of the U.S. grouped together act the same.
Yeah.
There are different pockets in the Midwest that may be slightly different, but like the Southeast in general is, about the same. West about the same, Northeast about the same. So if I stay in Tennessee, it's probably going to be the same in Alabama.
Yeah.
Mississippi. So thankfully we're in states that kind of are very pro-business. Mm-hmm. And then in states where we're not in very pro-business states, like we're in Illinois in a couple of centers, we're in smaller towns where they're very keen on us adding businesses to the shopping center. Like we have a mall in Western Illinois town, and it's a tiny little town, so the mayor will call my leasing director and ask her what's going on, who's new that's coming, is there a big national coming. Like smaller towns where you can impact the economy, they're more pro-business than larger towns. I don't really need you.
Right. We're not going to bend over backwards for your project. We've got a bunch of people that want to do things. What are you going to do for us versus, hey, we'd love to see some development. We want to see, businesses here. We want to see, increased growth, tax revenue, all of it. How do we make that happen? How can we be on your side?
You're right.
Building those relationships, tough, easy. Really, do you gotta have some swagger and charm? Do you have to just know what you're talking about? Where is it a mix of all of it? How do you ingratiate yourself with the powers that be?
I think people want owners to try, and we are not a big ownership group. but we do all of our leasing and all of our redevelopment in-house. So it feels much smaller than it is. You know, we may have a couple of centers, but like I'm on the phone with local leasing people all the time. My sister Lydia, who does our leasing director, is on the phone with people all the time. Wyatt, my co-owner, is on the phone. So like we are
Right.
actively, and I think local towns see that. They see that people they want to add business, so they like us.
This isn't just another notch in the portfolio. This is
Exactly.
something that you guys are actively hands-on, working, and they can sense that, they.
Yeah.
And that really, I mean, that speaks to really anything that you're doing. If you actually care about what you're doing, people will sense that you are genuine and will appreciate that you're being genuine. So that's excellent insight. Now, transitioning real quick, let's talk about retail redevelopment. What does it mean? What are the, most exciting things about redevelopment? Can you tell me a little bit, when you look at a redevelopment deal, what does that mean?
Something with vacancy, something where you can create value, something where you can create jobs and businesses and impact a community, whether it be a big city in like Nashville, Tennessee, where we have a project, or, town like Sterling, Illinois, where we can create businesses and create value. And then ultimately, hopefully sell it for more in the future. That's our hope. But the fun part is the creating the value.
And where are you finding these deals? Where do you typically go to find the deals? I know you're talking to a lot of brokers. I'm sure you're searching on your own.
A lot of it's on Crexi, LoopNet, different commercial real estate platforms, but most of it right now is on Crexi. I mean, there's some auction platforms, but wherever we can get our hands on stuff, and a lot of the stuff is listed on Crexi.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. I'm always encouraged to see people that are not only using the platform but successfully growing their portfolios, managing their portfolios, growing their wealth using the Crexi tools. So that's awesome to hear. And one of the reasons why you've been recognized, you are considered a power user on Crexi. You are very active, and for that we definitely wanted to recognize you and understand how does Ben do it, right? So I appreciate you letting us, peek behind the kimono a little bit on how you've been able to grow at such a tremendous, size and speed. When it comes to leasing, I know you mentioned your sister's the head director of leasing. Is that something that are you proactively reaching out to tenants, or how are you finding these businesses? I'm sure, you're putting the spaces up, on sites like Crexi to get exposure there. But how much of that is, them knocking on your door, and how much is you knocking on theirs?
Yeah, probably 50-50. I mean, we'll cold call, we'll advertise locally, we'll national, you kind of have to have relationships, but locals, a lot of cold calling helps. So, emailing random businesses, Facebook messaging random businesses, really just kind of trying to get in front of the powers that be. If you like a coffee in Wichita, Kansas, and you want them in your shopping center and you think it makes sense for their business, you just call that coffee shop in Wichita, Kansas, sometimes a billion times, where you say buy. So it's probably 50-50. Sometimes people reach out to us, but most of the time it's with local tenants, it's reaching out to them.
Nice. And then I would love it if if you have a quick deal story or anecdote on a recent redevelopment or flip that you did. Just walk us through. Hey, it was ugly when I got it. This is what we did. This is how we were able to get out. Just a quick and dirty deal story if you can.
Yeah. Let me think of a really good one. We feel we leased up. I guess we had a center in Nebraska that I like doing malls because it really impacts the entire towns, especially malls in small towns. Like when you are in a small town and you have a half dead mall, it's kind of like a running joke in the town. Oh, there's our shitty mall. It's or crappy mall, whatever. It's all empty. But when you do these malls in small towns like, Norfolk, Nebraska, or like we have one in Sterling, Illinois, where we can buy it at 30-40% occupied, bring in a bunch of locals, and then maybe one or two now. It changed the entire perception in town. So we bought a mall in Nebraska. We sold that mall in Nebraska. We bought a mall in Sterling, Illinois. We're pretty full in Sterling. We'll probably sell that in the near future. But the exciting part is not the resale. The exciting part is seeing articles come in of like, look at all these businesses. The exciting part is like seeing new coffee shops and new tattoo shops and new, boutiques open, and really just getting the change of like perceived value of that mall for people locally in small towns. So the success story is really not just like, hey, we made money, flip. The success story. It's like hearing from random people in Sterling, Illinois, that'll call our office and be like, hey, we never even gave two craps about the mall, and now we love it because we go down there all the time.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that.
That is tremendous, because it really does illustrate, and I think what some people forget too, is real estate's potential to change and shape communities. Yeah. It can go from a blight on the community to, now something that people are excited to spend time with their families on Saturdays and Sundays. Entrepreneurs may see an opportunity here to start their first business in a kiosk now that there's foot traffic. It just has such an exponential effect that can really ripple and be such a positive for a community. And I think a lot of times people miss on that aspect of real estate and commercial real estate, that you really do have the power to literally shape people's everyday life and their community with the choices and the decisions that you make. It's a lot of power, but nice to know that, the Ben Hams of the world are out there making better communities for people. So that's a great deal story. We're running short on time here, so I'm going to, jump to our last topic here and just ask you, what pieces of advice would you give, or questions would you ask potential shopping center investors?
I mean, so all of our stuff is bought and sold with our own money. So we don't really reach out to a lot of people to invest with us, but usually if somebody wants to get into this business, I would say start really small. Start with centers that you think you can handle yourself, and buy in cash.
Cash is king.
Yeah. Because if you lose tenants, you're not over leveraged. A lot of guys have appetites for $10, $15 million centers, and they got $2 million in cash, which they can do if it's Class A national tenants. But if that national declares bankruptcy, they're kind of...
Yeah. Once that boat starts rocking, you're taking on water.
Mm-hmm. It's a very thin margin. Everything has to work perfectly. But if you buy $500,000, probably much less desirable center,
yeah,
if he loses a couple tenants, it is what it is. He can just replace that tenant fairly easily. Yeah, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Hey, Ben, I really appreciate it. Thank you for joining and sharing your insights, especially on such important topics. Really do appreciate your time. I know you're very busy, so thank you for taking this morning to sit down and chat with us. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they find you? What's the best way? Email, social media?
Email's great, Ben at Brookwood Capital ADV, and then they'll probably see my spam emails on Crexi, which is like...
Well, Ben, again, thank you for making the time to come and hang out and, give us an education on what's happening with value add retail and shopping centers. It's been super valuable. And thanks to everyone who tuned in today. If you enjoyed this episode, do not miss the next one. Visit go.crexi.com/podcast and sign up to get the next episode delivered straight to your inbox. Of course, you can also subscribe to the Crexi Podcast on your favorite podcast app, and check out our YouTube channel for video recordings of each episode. Take care, and be sure to tune in next time.